For a moment, I honestly believed that the motel, with its obnoxious orange and yellow neon sign reading Sunrise Mo, was a mirage or a hallucination. We had been driving through endless wheat fields all day long, without even so much as a barn to indicate civilization. According to the map, the next town wasn't for a few hundred miles, and there wasn't supposed to be a motel along this stretch of highway. "Dylan, look!" My girlfriend of 1 year, Annalise, pulled over and pointed at the sign, which flashed so brightly it actually made my eyes water. "We can stay there for the night." "I don't know, Lise. It's not on the map." "So? Well, don't you think it's a little strange?" Annalise rolled her pretty brown eyes. "Oh, Dylan, you know I love you, but you can be so paranoid at times. It's just a motel, but it's not on the map." "Well, neither was that gas station from this morning, but you didn't seem to have a problem with that. Come on, babe. We're both tired. Besides, it's just for one night." I sighed, running my hand through my hair. Annalise was right. We were both pretty beat, neither of us having the energy to drive much further. And maybe I was just being paranoid. So what if the Sunrise Motel wasn't on the map? Maybe the map was just out of date. I made a mental note to later tell Annalise that she needed a GPS for her car. My girlfriend resumed driving towards the motel, and as we got closer, I began to notice how run down it really was. Several windows appeared to have been boarded up, and the paint was peeling. I took it to be bright yellow, although it was kind of hard to tell with that stupid light, and some of it was completely missing in patches. I couldn't imagine they got much business, and my suspicions were confirmed by the mostly empty parking lot. I climbed out of the car and opened up the trunk, pulling out our suitcases and setting them down. The icy January air burned my nose and throat as I breathed it in and out. At least the highway wasn't frozen. Annalise and I had been in Calgary for my brother's wedding. I was an usher, and Annalise got to meet my extended family. They all adored her, which was great, of course. We hadn't been together for that long, but I believed Annalise might be the girl for me. Now she came up beside me and held my hand, the other lugging a heavy suitcase. We walked through the motel's front doors and into a lobby with orange walls and a brown shag rug. And I thought, whoever designed this place was a moron. The far wall was dominated by a bulky oakwood desk covered in dents and scratches, and behind it sat an older woman with frizzy gray hair and a name tag reading Pam pinned to her oversized purple sweater. She didn't look up when Annalise and I approached her. Excuse me," Annalise cleared her throat. "We need a room for the night." Pam just grunted and muttered, "Two of you? Do you see anyone else?" I thought. Out loud I said, "Yes." "Just for one night?" "Yes." Pam turned around and grabbed a room key off the rack behind her. "I'm putting you in room 204. The cost of one night is $30. "Let me pay, Lise," I said. "You already paid for the gas earlier." She nodded, and I slid a crumpled bill towards Pam. "Here you go." She snatched it up in her bony fingers and brought it close to her face, frowning as if she'd never seen a bill before. "Is this real?" "Yes." "You kids better not be messing with me," she snapped. "I can assure you we're not," said Annalise. Pam scoffed and muttered something under her breath. "Whatever. The stairs on your left, you can't miss them." "Thank you," Annalise murmured. "Well, she wasn't pleasant," I grumbled as we climbed the stairs. They reeked of mildew and neglect. Isn't a receptionist supposed to make you feel welcome? You can't expect good service in a place like this. "Well, I told you this wasn't a good idea. One night, Dylan," Annalise reminded me. Our room was a cramped space, with enough room for a queen-size bed, desk, and a chair. A door to the right led into the bathroom, which I was very reluctant to enter. The only window was cracked and dirty, but it gave us a beautiful view of the parking lot. Annalise and I checked the bed for bed bugs or anything else unspeakable. We found nothing of the sort, but I already felt dirty. So did Annalise, because she said, "I'm gonna go take a shower." I said, "Do you realize that the bathroom is probably a health hazard?" "I'm sure it's fine," she said. After the door shut behind her, I waited for a minute, expecting her to scream. I was already in bed when Annalise emerged, a towel wrapped around her lithe body. Her light brown hair down and damp. I couldn't help but ogle as she changed into a tank top and boxer shorts. But this awful room, with its drab green walls and scratchy sheets, had already killed my sex drive. Annalise crawled in next to me, and for a minute we just lay there in silence. "It's so quiet," she whispered. "Do you think there's anyone in the next room?" "I don't know, and I don't care as long as they don't wake us up with a drunken argument or sex." "True." She kissed my cheek. "Good night, Dylan." "Good night, Lise." At around 1 in the morning, only 3 hours after going to bed, I woke up feeling thirsty, like really thirsty, as if my mouth were full of cotton balls. I sat up and swung my legs out of bed, willing to brave the bathroom for some water, but then I noticed Annalise. She was sitting straight up, sheets wrapped tightly around her trembling body, head turned towards the door. A soft hitch in her breathing told me she was crying, but doing her best to muffle the sound. "Lise, hey, Lise, what's the matter?" She just clapped a hand over her mouth, while the other pointed. A finger of light had slipped through the narrow gap between the bottom of the door and the carpet. Beyond it, soft footsteps padded back and forth, as if someone were pacing. "Annalise, talk to me. Did you have a nightmare or something?" Very slowly, Annalise shook her head. I gripped her shoulder and turned her around to face me. Even in the dark, I could make out the silvery tear tracks on her cheeks and the redness of her eyes. Her lips had been chewed bloody. "Lise, what's wrong?" "Oh, Dylan," she began to shake violently. "Dylan, it was terrible." "What was terrible? You're not making any sense." That poor girl." Out in the hallway, the footsteps had grown heavier, more frantic. I shook my head confused. "Who the hell is that?" I muttered. A door slammed open with such force that I swear I heard the wood splinter. My heart jumped into my throat. Annalise wailed and grabbed onto my arm. A deep male voice boomed the word, "Hey," and the pacing footsteps became a run. A woman began to sob, and so did Annalise. I leapt up and made a frantic dash for the door. Panicked adrenaline flooding my brain and leaving no room for rational thought. My shaking hand found the knob and started to twist it, but something on the other side slammed into the door with such force that I was knocked back on my ass. "Help me!" someone shrieked. Their voice was so shrill and high-pitched that I initially assumed that they were female. But then they wailed, "Help me! Help me, please!" And I realized it was a man. A terrified, semi-hysterical man running from something that clearly intended to kill him. "Dylan, no!" Annalise shrieked, but I unlocked the door and he stumbled in. "Close it, quick! Barricade it with that chair." I did as he told me. My movements were clumsy and frantic. Outside, the deep-voiced man was storming around yelling, "Matt, this is the end. You hear me? The end." Our visitor, Matt I assumed, sat on the floor, curled in the fetal position and rocking back and forth. Annalise remained in bed, staring at him with wide, uncomprehending eyes. The woman had stopped crying, and for some reason, that frightened me more than the heavy sobs themselves. "What is going on?" I demanded. "Shh, not so loud," Matt hissed. "That door won't hold forever. Once he figures out I'm in here, I'm screwed. Unless I can escape." I grabbed my phone from beside the bedside table and switched on the flashlight app, wanting to get a better look at Matt. What I saw made me gasp out loud. He was young, not much older than myself, dressed in a ragged t-shirt and jeans. His blonde hair was long and tangled. Every inch of bare skin was covered in scars. And I mean covered. Arms, hands, neck, face, his flesh resembled the surface of the moon, all pits and grooves. Worse than that, however, was his face. Matt's nose was gone, leaving behind a pair of bloody, crusted holes, rimmed in jagged cartilage. His right eye was swollen shut, bruised midnight black. The other was wide and wild with terror. "He's gonna kill me," Matt gasped. "Who?" "The man outside," Annalise whispered. "I heard him earlier. She trailed off and shook her head, clearly unwilling to vocalize what she had overheard. It frightened me, seeing Annalise like this. Before, she had been the brave one, insisting that we stay at this creepy motel and calling me out on my cowardice. Now, she looked like a frightened rabbit cornered by a fox. I began to dial 911, but Matt jumped up and knocked the phone out of my hand so violently that it went sailing across the room and hit the wall. "Don't," he hissed. "It won't help. I have to get out of here." Another deafening crash rattled my bones as the angry, deep-voiced man threw his bulk against the door. This time, I definitely heard the wood splinter. By this point, he had stopped yelling, and the silence filled me with dread. In a situation like this, silence could only be something terrible after all. "I gotta get out of here," Matt said, more to himself than Annalise or I. He darted across the room and began slapping his palms against the window over and over again. The cacophony in the room was so loud that I could feel the vibrations in my teeth. Annalise lay on her side, whimpering, hands over her ears, a wet spot forming around her steadily growing. She had pissed herself out of terror, and I felt pretty close to doing the same. The window finally shattered, sending tiny glass shards raining down like hail. Matt climbed out and held onto the edge for a moment, staring back at Annalise and I. Broken glass had sliced his hands, and blood dripped onto the carpet. "Thank you," he mouthed. "Now save yourselves while you can." He dropped out of sight, just as a final blow to the door dislodged the chair and sent it flying across the room. It slammed into the wall just above the bed and shattered like the window had. I threw myself on top of Annalise, my arms and legs forming a protective barrier around her as a hulking form stepped in. Whoever this man was, he wasn't a normal human. First, there was his size. He had to be at least 7 feet tall. The top of his bald head grazing the ceiling, his shoulders were the width of a dining room table, each muscular arm thicker than my entire body. He had tiny round eyes that glowed white in the dark, and a mouth that seemed permanently set in a sneer, displaying a row of needle-like teeth. "Where did he go?" the monster snarled. I just shook my head, so terrified I had momentarily forgotten how to speak. Not that I would have given away Matt's location if I could. It didn't seem to make a difference, however. The hulking monstrosity stepped across the room, shaking the floor with each step, and somehow squeezed his mass through the window. Minutes later, there was a long, agonized scream that ended in a dying gurgle, and then it was over. Annalise whimpered, Dylan, we have to." "I know," I said. "I know." I lay beside her, hugging her close, waiting for the fear-induced paralysis to fade, allowing me to move again. Then I got up, retrieved my cell phone. The screen was cracked, but the device was otherwise unscathed. When the 911 operator asked about the nature of the emergency, I honestly didn't know what to say, so I just told her, "Sunset Motel, please. Send help quick." "Are you in any immediate danger, sir?" "No, I don't think so." I glanced over to Annalise, who had begun crying again, tears falling like rain into the starchy sheets. "But trust me, it's bad." The police questioned Annalise and I in our room. We told them everything. Well, almost everything. Annalise couldn't articulate what she had heard before I woke up, literally gagging on her words whenever she attempted to speak. Thankfully, the police already had enough information. We packed in a shell-shocked haze and were escorted to the car. I made a point of not looking directly at the crime scene, but I still caught the occasional glimpse. Fragments of a bigger, gruesome picture. Police cruisers flashing red and blue. Bright yellow police tape. A body bag on a gurney. Pam, pale-faced, and wrung out, talking to an officer. I drove the rest of the way home, and Elise was too shaken to even hold on to the steering wheel. We didn't speak. Every now and then, Annalise would turn to me, open her mouth, but could only let out a dry sob or a whimper. Finally, I told her to go to sleep, which she did. Back home, I waited for a call from the police or a report on the news. Anything that could shed some light on what had happened, but nothing ever came. Internet searches led nowhere, and when I called a non-emergency number and spoke to the police department who had handled the case, they were quick to brush me off. It has nothing to do with you, they said. You'd be wise to forget about it and move on. That was over 3 months ago. Annalise and I are still together. She's back to her regular self, but refuses to discuss what happened, which is fine by me, because I don't want to talk about it either. I've spent many sleepless nights trying to piece it all together. While part of me knows there has to be a logical explanation for what happened that night, certain things just don't add up. Why wasn't the Sunrise Motel on the map? Why can't I find a trace of it anywhere online? Why is there zero information on the case? And what exactly was that giant man with the glowing white eyes? Maybe I will never know the truth, and maybe that's for the best. All I know for sure is that my misgivings were right. There was something very wrong with the Sunrise Motel.